He heard my decision. Who started it, I don't know, but they both started crying. This was not within my presence, so I didn't know about this until sometime later. I guess I can interject this at this point, that how ironic that within 20, 25 years, as people were vacating the city of Buffalo, Dallas, or National Gypsum, moved their headquarters to Dallas. How ironic that would have been if everything else played out and David came to Dallas. I don't know whether I would have moved or tried to find other employment. I really don't know, but I've often thought of that over the years. One of the things in the insurance business that was never properly explained or I didn't perceive it as such was that when you got a young 24, 25-year-old man, his natural market would be people his own age, and most of them were not in a managerial capacity, so I really couldn't see him during the day, but had to see him in the evening. And this is one thing, and I'll end this whole series with regrets that I've had over the years. That was one of them. I don't know. I think I could have been successful working for National Gypsum. I think whether in Buffalo or in Dallas, how high I would have risen in the organization, I don't have any idea. What my income would have been, I don't know. But I do know that I would have had much more time, and I would have had my evenings free like a normal person, as opposed to having to go out and see young people that the only time they could see me was at night, and of course they couldn't make a decision without their wife being there to interject, have her input regarding whether he could afford it or couldn't afford it. Most wives at that time, and maybe even now, have a dim view of why they ought to spend money on insurance as opposed to the new car or the new dining room table or whatever it might be. But that's past history. But I do recall one time standing at the back door after we had moved over to Coon, and I'll get into that in a minute, where Donald, God bless you, you stood at the top of the stairs there in the mudroom and said, "Daddy, do you have to go out again tonight?" Boy, I'll tell you, that tore my heart out. But there wasn't anything else I could have done, I guess. Just plowed ahead. Getting back to the apartment that we rented over on Palmer Avenue, my recollection, it was 104. I think it was going from Delaware to Elmwood. I think it was in the second block, and I think it was on the south side of the street, in a flat, an apartment that wasn't that dissimilar, Don, from the apartment that you had over your house in Rochester. Living room in the front and bedroom in the front, a bedroom in the back, along with a kitchen, and a living room in the middle. And here's another irony. At some point, Larry Ward, who had come back and went to work for the Glidden Paint Company, was, after his basic training there in Cleveland, was transferred to Buffalo. Well, all of a sudden, one day he shows up on our front steps, and he and Maggie and Patty, and what possessed me, I don't have any idea, but what I did was, because he said, well, we've got to find an apartment, and I'll have to get a motel or something like that, and I said, and I got kicked in the shins afterwards for this one, I said, well, move right in here with us. Well, we didn't have enough room for us, no less another 2 adults and a child. The funny parts to it was that The only place for Patty to sleep was in the same crib with Donald, and we had enjoyed allowing us, not having to wake up too early in the morning, because we never taught Donald how to climb out of the crib. But Patty did. Patty showed Don how to crawl out of the crib, and we still kid her to this day about teaching our oldest to crawl out of the crib, and in the morning we'd find the two of them wandering around the house. One thing that the wards didn't have to worry about was a nose guard. You guys will know what I'm talking about, on a toilet seat, that you put the toilet seat on top of the regular toilet seat, and it had a deflector for males, rubber in nature. Well, on some occasion, either Don took it apart or it just fell off. It got flushed in the toilet. Well, neither one of us had any money, so what we did was, Larry and I, who neither one of whom was in any way mechanically inclined, we took the toilet off, either stick or some kind of a rod or whatever have you. We finally got the nose guard out of the toilet and put it back where it was, and paid a little bit more attention to prevent it from going down the toilet again. That was a real session on a Saturday or Sunday. I do recall Betty Jane saying to me after they had, gone down to the car, was when we were by ourselves, "You invited them to stay here?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe I should have consulted with you first." "Yes, I think you should have." Well, I think they stayed there a week or 10 days or 2 weeks. It gave the ladies, with the men working, a chance to catch up with past history and what had happened since we had gotten married in the military and that type of thing, and the kids were able to play together, and that helped. Somewhere along the line, I don't think it was in Oklahoma, but I rather suspect it was in Alabama. I think we went to the SPCA and we got a tiny little dog, and I think there are pictures downstairs of Floppy, because he was a kind of a beagle type, black, mixed breed, had big floppy ears, and so he got the name of Floppy. Well, he was company for Mom, for Betty Jane, there in Alabama. Now, how in the world we got this dog home, I don't have any idea, because I don't think we would have put him on the plane with Betty Jane when she flew home. I don't think he would have stayed in the BOQ, Bachelor Officers Quarters, with me. Somehow we got him home. Maybe we had gone home to visit and left the dog up there. But Floppy was a member of the family and was with us, and then stayed at 720 Parkhurst with Betty Jane and Mom and Dad until I got home. And I do recall it was soon after I got home when you opened the front door of the house and the dogs just ran around, because Mom and Dad had a collie, and I guess the two dogs got along well together. But on one occasion, when I was coming up the driveway, or coming up the steps after coming home, it was before we moved into an apartment, that the door was open, and the dog was so excited he ran like crazy down the front steps and into across the front lawn and into the street. And unfortunately, there was a car coming along, and that was the end of Floppy. I immediately took him over to that veterinary hospital over there, right near the railroad tracks on Sheridan Drive. I think it's since been rebuilt with new office facilities. But of course, the dog was dead. At this time, after we moved into the apartment, Mom and Dad still had ownership of Sunset, and I rather suspect that they kept it until the late 50s, and maybe it was that they decided to sell Sunset Bay about the same time that they decided to sell Parkhurst, and as I've mentioned before, buy a different house, the one at 591 Delaware Road, to facilitate Grandma Coon, Dad's mother, to be able to live with them. I'm sure that there are pictures down there in the earlier Coon family photo album of Donald in his pajamas up at Sunset, and I do believe that Mom and Don and Grandma spent a lot of time at Sunset during the summer, and I would come out to Sunset, and I think I went back in even when I was on quote vacation. I would still come into the office maybe on Tuesday and Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or something like that. So even then, the business took over and had me by the tail. And Mom subsequently found out that the only way she could get the old man on vacation was to get out of town. Because if I was going to be in town, I was going to be running down to the office. While we were in the apartment, we only had obviously one car. We had the Plymouth that Mom had purchased at Damon Motors up in Silver Creek, and that's the car that I used. And poor Mom on Saturdays was the only time that she could have the car and go shopping. And as unaccustomed as I was in taking care of Donald, Mom would go shopping on Saturday, and of course at that time Don would start crying, or he needed his pants changed, diapers changed, or something like that. And oftentimes, and we kidded about it later, but it probably wasn't too pleasant for Mom. Mom had to get in the car, run like hell to go shop, and when she got through shopping and on her way home, she could see me holding Donald, who was crying, standing in the driveway, waiting for her to get home and settle him down. Me not having a clue as to how to get him to calm down. I'm sure that was a sore point, along with many others Mom had with me. I knew that we had at that time a GI Bill that allowed returning servicemen to buy a house at a very favorable interest rate, 4.5%. We didn't see that again until just recently here in 2004 or 5, where the numbers came down that low. But we began looking for a house, and Dad said, well, I think he had some savings bonds, and all I needed was 10% down, and we found a house over on Conan Drive for $14,900 or $15,000, and so Dad was able to loan us $1,500. I can remember going down to the bank and Carl Matthews and sitting there, and poor Dad signing all these savings bonds to cash them in to loan me the money. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but if I don't say it now, I'll forget it. And we promised Mom and Dad to pay them back. Well, we always said, or I said, when we have some extra money, we'll send Mom and Dad a check at the end of the month. Well, we didn't have any extra money. And finally, God bless your mother, your grandmother, Betty Jane said, tell you what, Don, we're going to do. And this might have been a year or so later, or longer. I don't recall. But she said, we're going to send a check to Mom and Dad first, and then whatever we got left over, that we'll use for our expenses. So we bought the house, and I think closing was like October or November of 1956, which was only a month or two after Paul was born. But here we had this brand new house. Mom and Dad had, and I think Dad had offered, it was $16,000. And Dad asked me whether I wanted to buy the old homestead at 720 Parkhurst. And I said, oh, no. Because all I could remember was this garage in the back that was tilted. I could remember the driveway that kept coming apart. I can remember a dark and dank basement. And so I said no. Well, what he wanted was $18,000 for it. Well, and he could have saved the sales cost or sales commission, and if I had bought it. And that was one regret that I have, that I didn't buy that house, because the people who subsequently bought it, because there was a lot next door, a single lot, and the people who bought it, as anybody who drives by there now will see, not only put in a double garage on the second lot, but also either a family room or bedrooms above the garage. So it mightily increased the size of the house, and there was a stairway going up where if you went to the right, you went up to the 3 bedrooms that we had and bathroom, and what they did was if you walked to the left and went up a couple stairs, you went up to either a family room type of arrangement and or bedrooms and or both. So another silly decision on my part. It was kind of hectic when we moved in, having a 1-month-old or 2-month-old baby, Paul having been born in September of 56. And I know when we moved in, the people previously that owned the house had wallpaper in the living room and had painted over it. Well, if you've ever seen paint over wallpaper, it's almost impossible, even with a steamer, to get that stuff off of there. So Mom and I think we had an old beer can opener or something with a point on it, and we had to score the walls in order to get some. Then we got the steamer and were able to get the painted wallpaper off, but then we had to spend an awful lot of time, or I did, replastering to take care of the holes that we had dug in the wall. But it worked out all right. We got it done. I'm sure the moving people weren't too excited, because at that time they had the mom's piano that we had brought from Cleveland, I'm sure, and I'm sure the movers had a hectic time getting it up those stairs into the apartment on Palmer, and also getting it back down and into the front room of our house over on Coon. So I think it was in 56 that we bought the house. I think we didn't add the family room until the early 60s. Larry was just a youngster, so I would think maybe 62, 63, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. We had a lovely family with Mom and Dad and myself and Betty Jane, and 2 nice young boys, and were able to We had a fenced yard that we could play in. We had a small wading pool that the boys could jump in and out of. And I think it might have been somewhere at this time when we acquired Tippy. I think we were up at the beach one spring or summer, and there was this poor lonely dog that had a white tip on his tail. Didn't seem to belong to anybody. Whether he did or not, I don't know, but he attached himself to two young boys and myself and Betty Jane, and he went home with us, and God bless him, he was there for 17 or 18 years, and was a joy. Just a wonderful dog, and started losing it, and we had to, being the coward that I am, I had Betty Jane take the dog over to the veterinary hospital to have him put down. But he gave us an awful lot of joy, as each one of the boys will recall. He would get loose on occasion, and we'd frantically get in the car or bicycles and ride around trying to find him, and somebody would leave a gate open, or he'd find some way. He was actually capable of running like crazy, hitting the chain link fence, and over he'd go. The other part of the joy was our next door neighbors, the Worrells, which was one of the Worrells and Jimmy were one of the reasons that the people that we bought the house from wanted to get the hell out of there, because Jimmy would come over and pull up all the plants, and he was a terror, but we got along with him well. And who was it, Greg and whatever the girl's name was, and of course the Comos on the other side, who were also had three boys until they had two girls, and they all being about the same age as you guys were. So and then the Murrows moved in around the corner. Debbie was a real pain, and I guess still is. But the boys got along well with Pat. And who else was it? Pat, and of course Eddie. And again, I'm jumbling some of this stuff up, but at some point we put up a shed out in the back. I think that was after we did the family room. And as long as I'm here, I might as well get into it. Mike Markarian had an older retired contractor who knew electrical, concrete, brick, wood, insulation, everything under the sun. Carl Christoph. He had a son that I subsequently did business with, and I think Larry did too, until he went off in another direction. He was an attorney that was in the service for a while, and came home and got connected with a very prestigious law firm here in town. But anyhow, the father, Carl, was retired. He wanted to get paid in cash. Mike Markarian had him put a family room on the back of his house. John Markarian had him put a family room on the back of his house after that. Chuck Markarian had him put a family room on the back of his house. And it was through Chuck that I met Carl and said, well, I need one too. So Carl and I talked, and we talked about his not wanting to work a full day, but in the morning, and chances are at around noontime, I think Betty Jane probably made him a sandwich, but I think he was more interested in a shooter, as Grunk used to call it, shot in a beer. And I think the first day he came over, he had a shot in a beer, and he said, Don, why don't you have one? And I said, okay. Well, I had one, and I ended up soon thereafter up in bed laying down. I couldn't keep up with Carl, but he was very accustomed to being able to handle that sort of thing. A nice old gentleman that had snow white hair. Oh, so it must have been in the early 60s. It might have been 62, 63, something like that, because Larry was born in February of 61, and I think Larry was only 1 or 2 when Carl was around, and Larry kept referring to him as Santa Claus, because that's just exactly what he looked like. And the arrangement that Carl and I had was that I would sneak home early before he left at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and whatever needed to be done, whether it was hauling lumber from the front yard where it was delivered to the backyard, or bricks that had to be put up on a scaffold to make the chimney, I would spend the late afternoon or early evening putting bricks up on the scaffold so that when Carl got there the next day, he could mix the mortar and brick the chimney, or put the rafters in, or the whatever it might have been. He not only put the family room on, but he rearranged our kitchen and put the sink where it ultimately was. From where it was in the doorway coming from the sink was in the doorway coming from the kitchen to the family room. He moved it, made additional cabinets at home that corresponded with the cabinets that we had, and helped to redesign the kitchen and the layout that we had when you guys remember it. Getting the furnace that we had to generate a sufficient amount of heat to the back room was a problem, and that's part of the reason why we put the fireplace in. Carl convinced me that we needed a heatilator, and which was a metal casing that would help to retain the heat as opposed to it all going up the chimney. And I subsequently took computer fans and put them in behind the air vents to help draw cold air in, let it get heated behind the heatilator, and come out the vents at the top of the fireplace. So there were things that I learned and did that I ordinarily wouldn't have done. But the reason I did it was, if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done, because we didn't have any money. We didn't have any money to hire somebody to do some of the things that I wanted done. Not having a basement, we needed more storage space. That's part of the reason why we put the shed up in the backyard. But I also found out how much tongue and groove lumber would be to floor the ceiling of the garage to give us more space up there to put storms and screens and boxes and everything under the sun. And about this time, Douglas was working for Pittsburgh Paint Company downtown. And in the source conversation, I mentioned to Doug that I needed some planking. And he said, "Oh, geez, Don," he says, we get lumber in where he said, "It's good lumber. It's got PPG all over it, and all we do is put it in the garbage or burn it or get rid of it and somehow." So he said, "If you want to come down with your station wagon," he said, "bring a hammer along, or a pair of pliers, or crowbar." And here I was out in their back parking lot, taking their wooden crates apart, taking the nails out so I didn't tear up the inside of the car. I guess this is all this thriftiness or cheapness or whatever you want to call it was implanted in my head early on by my mother. So anyhow, I got a sufficient amount of lumber to plank floor, the rafters of the garage, which gave us additional storage space, and all it cost me was the nails to put the things in. Another thrifty move on my part was periodically they'd be tearing some older building downtown or any place around down, and what they had was when the building was torn down, they'd have bricks all over the place. Well, I accumulated an awful lot of bricks because when I'd see a building being torn down, I'd pull the car up, open the back of the station wagon, and in would come bricks. And of course, you guys probably recall that what I did was go around the entire perimeter of the house, because it used to frustrate the devil out of me to cut the grass and then have to go around with a weed eater or down on my hands and knees and clip the grass that was growing up underneath the chain link fence. So by putting bricks under the bottom of the chain link fence, I could run the lawnmower closer to the fence and not have to get down on my hands and knees and clean up the mess of additional weeds or grass. The family room really was a benefit because it gave us an additional room. Let's see, as long as I'm on the house, we'll go to another, I think one time, and I can't remember when this was, but Mom always complained because we had a swinging door going from the living room into the dining room or dining area. And Mom often said what she wanted was to have the wall, there was a wall from the end of the house separating, as I say, the dining area from the living room, and this swinging door, and she was mightily concerned about the boys getting their fingers caught when the door swung back and forth. And so the two brothers, and you guys are going to remember the name better than I am, maybe it'll come to me, Bob and his brother who lived over on Kelvin, I approached them and said, look, we're going to South Carolina and we'll be gone for 10 days or so. It was probably at Easter time, or maybe it was at Christmas time, I can't recall. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the keys to the house. You guys got the truck and the know-how and whatever have you. Here's what I want. I want you to come in. I want you to tear this wall down, get rid of this door, which they did. And God bless them, they cleaned up after themselves. I'm sure there was a lot of plaster and not only taking the stuff down, but replastering the wall. Let me tell you, I had one happy spouse when we got home from, I think it was from South Carolina, when she walked in, and you guys, I think, went in first and kept yelling, Mom, get in here, come look at what's been done. Well, Betty Jane was one happy camper when she saw that the wall had been taken down. I can't recall now. It didn't cost very much to have the Slocums, that's their name. The Slocums come in, Bob and Brian, or I think it was, take care of this removal of the wall and cleaned it all up while we were gone. It would have been a heck of a mess to have it done while we were there. So it was a wonderful opportunity to have this done while we were gone. And over the course of the almost 40 years that we lived there were other odds and ends and things that were done and not done, and things that I did and you guys helped me with. But we had a nice home, nice family, and it was very enjoyable until the time came when we needed to get away from a two-story house and get into a one-floor plan. You guys don't have any idea how many notes I've made, reminders of things to include. I've got a whole series of notes, and I'll try to keep this interesting, to keep your attention so you don't fast forward everything. But it's been fun so far, bringing all this up to date, and you're probably getting more information than you really wanted to know. I could have probably done in one sentence what I've taken a paragraph to give you. But you know them. And as you guys often said, after you asked me a question and I gave you a long answer, they said, you guys would always say, Dad, all I wanted was a very short answer. So when Larry asked me to do this, you're not getting the short version, you're getting the long version. So fast forward. One of the things that I did do through a friend and client of mine out in Lackawanna, he got me a pole that I could put up by the side of the driveway to put a basketball hoop on, and a flag at the top, which you guys used quite often, I remember. There was also a maple tree that was between the driveway and the Como's fence that was unique in a way, and it was, as long as it was small, but all of a sudden it started growing, and it wasn't going to be too long before again, not me, but Mom said, Don, you better have that tree taken out of there. It's going to uproot your entire driveway in front of the garage. There was no way in the world I could do it, so can't remember who it was, but that tree was taken down because all of a sudden it didn't grow too fast for a while, but then it shot up like you guys did. And as you know, I was forever building shelves and taking the old kitchen cabinets and putting them down in the mud room. Always trying to find more space to put whatever to store, because we didn't obviously have a basement. Made some plywood benches that opened up where you could put your toys. These were all, I guess I enjoyed working with my hands more than maybe some other people did, but part of it was for our whole family's enjoyment and or keep me out of the bars. And of course I think you all recall the times that I spent each summer playing softball with Bowerly and Conover and Illig and Westcott and Kester's and DeEath and Wayland's. And I think Larry spent more time with me at the ballparks than you other guys did. We kept busy. I'll touch on David briefly before I get into you guys traveling to see him wherever he might have been, Puerto Rico, Dallas, that type of thing. When he got out of the military, because he was 3 years younger than I, and he got out 3 years after I did, he had joined the 101st Airborne Division and learned how to jump out of planes. And one night when we were having a few pops, I hope I don't run out of too much tape here, maybe I can get it on the other side. Had a couple pops, and I said, what in the world, we were both second lieutenants in the artillery, what in the world ever possessed you to jump out of airplanes? And this is a short story that I'll lengthen. We had a couple of beers, I think, and we're sitting there talking, and after I asked him a question, he said, Don, he said, you were the firstborn And he said, when I went to Lincoln School, he said, for the first few weeks or months, the same teachers that taught you taught me, and they would constantly refer to me as Donald. And then I went on to junior high school, and the teachers there were some of the teachers that you had. So they would call me Donald for a couple weeks anyhow. And then when I went to senior high, the same thing. And then Bowling Green. And I was always in your shadow. I didn't know what else to take besides business, so I did. I didn't know whether to join ROTC, but you did, so I did. And he said, finally, I was out from underneath your shadow, and I was going to do something you big fat slob wouldn't do, and that's jump out of an airplane. So he became his own man. And I had never recognized this problem that a second child would have living in the shadow of the older son or daughter or brother or sister, whatever it might have been. You can probably explain that better, both Paul and Larry. But I never recognized it, and I'm sure, Donald, I'm sure you never recognized it. Well, not to get into great detail, but David was entrepreneurial after he got out of the service. He did two things. One, he, not knowing where to go, what to do, after he got through working for Air France and traveling all over the world to France and South America, he tied in with a couple of friends of his back here in Kenmore, and they got into the real estate business. I think there were 2 or 3 of them. And they formed this partnership, and then I think subsequently David left town and went to Puerto Rico to work for the Coin Laundry Company before he got tied in with Pride Odorite. And when he left, the company didn't do too well, and they owed people money and whatever. So one of the guys, Jerry Ames by name, who I think, I think he lives out in California now, but nevertheless, when David left town, Jerry Ames pointed the finger at David and said, hey, if you need any money, you got to go after Dave. He's the one that ran off with the money and left us high and dry. The reason Jerry and one other friend of his told this story is because they didn't have the money and they didn't want to pay whomever. And at some point, David came back to town. He was in a barber shop that they all had gone to, and they were talking, and the barber said something about, geez, I understand you were the guy that ran off with all the money, and, well, anyhow, David got blamed for that fiasco, and he confronted the guy who was spreading the story that Dave ran off with all the goodies, and the guy said, David, I apologize, but we were here, didn't have the money, and you were away, so we blamed you. So poor David got the reputation of being a deadbeat. Which brings me to another story about David. While he was here, and soon after he got out of the military, he was mesmerized by parachutes, and he and another guy bought 100 used parachutes, and they were going to form a club. Well, anyway, as you heard, the phone rang and I got distracted. But anyhow, he was going to form a club and sell parachutes to the members, and they were going to have arrangements with an airplane and a pilot, and they were going to take these people up, and Dave was going to teach them, Dave and this other guy were going to teach them how to jump out of airplanes safely. And so we had these 100 parachutes. Well, it didn't take long before that didn't work out too well, and so Dave moved to Puerto Rico. Well, David didn't have any money to buy the parachutes, and he had to get a loan at the M&T. He went down to see our favorite Carl Matthews, and he got the loan, after he approached me and said, Don, I got a problem. He said, what I need is somebody here substantial enough to co-sign on the note for me. Oh, Dave, no problem. Geez, I'll co-sign. Not having mentioned anything to Betty Jane. Well, off Dave goes, where the parachutes are. He might have been with his friend here in town, or he might have taken him to Puerto Rico with him. I don't have any idea. But 6 months or a year later, can't recall, in the mail, we get a letter from the M&T saying that the primary borrower on this note, we can't reach him, he hasn't paid, so you as the co-signer, we're coming to you, so here's how much money you owe. Well, we didn't have any money either, and you can imagine Betty Jane opening this letter, because I think it was probably addressed to both of us, and confronting me when I get home. What did you do? You signed as a co-signer for a loan with your brother, and he's out of town and he's not paying? Well, it took a lot of telephone calls or letters or whatever. David completely forgot that I had